Stage 1, overwhelming exhaustion. The first and central stage of parental burnout is an exhaustion that goes far beyond ordinary tiredness. The researchers describe it as feeling drained by the parental role to the point of reaching the end of your tether, waking already depleted at the thought of facing another day of being needed, emotionally and physically wrung out in a way that sleep alone does not fix. This is not the normal tiredness of a hard week. It is a deep, cumulative depletion that builds when the demands have outweighed the resources for long enough, and it is the foundation everything else is built on. A parent in this stage is still doing everything: feeding, caring, showing up, but on fumes, with nothing left over, dreading the start of each day, not because they do not love their children, but because they have nothing left to meet them with. Recognizing this stage early matters enormously because exhaustion is where the whole progression begins and where it is most reversible. If the depletion can be addressed here through genuine rest, shared load, and support, burnout can be interrupted before it deepens. Left unaddressed, this exhaustion does not simply stay put. As the research shows, it tends to lead somewhere, which is what makes catching it at this stage so valuable. Stage 2, emotional distancing from your children. As exhaustion persists with no relief, a painful second stage tends to follow: emotional distancing. The research describes how depleted parents with nothing left to give begin to pull back emotionally from their children to preserve what little energy remains. The interactions continue, but they narrow to the functional: feeding, dressing, logistics, while the warmth, the play, the emotional presence quietly recede. It is vital to understand what this distancing actually is because it terrifies the parents who experience it. It is not a sign that you have stopped loving your child. It is the mind's attempt to protect a person who is running on empty, an automatic conservation of resources when there are almost none left. A parent in this stage often does the tasks while feeling strangely absent, present in body but withdrawn in heart, and then feels deep guilt for the very distance that exhaustion forced upon them. This stage is a clear signal that the burnout has progressed and needs real attention, but it is not a verdict on you as a mother. It is a symptom, a recognized, understood symptom of depletion, not evidence of a cold or failing heart. The warmth that has receded is not gone. It is buried under exhaustion. And as the underlying depletion is addressed, the emotional presence that distancing crowded out can return. Stage 3, losing the fulfillment in parenting. The next stage the research describes is a loss of fulfillment and accomplishment in the parental role. Where parenting once brought joy, meaning, or at least a sense of doing something that mattered, the burned out parent increasingly feels none of it, only the weight. As one description from the researchers captures it, parents reach a point of feeling they can no longer stand being in the role at all, even while still loving the children themselves. This stage is particularly disorienting because it strikes at something parents are told should be the deepest source of meaning in their lives. To feel fed up with parenting, to no longer derive any fulfillment from it, can feel like a betrayal of everything a mother is supposed to be, which is exactly why so many suffer it in silence, certain that admitting it would mark them as a bad parent. It does not. It marks them as a depleted one. Understanding this as a stage of burnout rather than a truth about your worth as a mother is genuinely important. The lost fulfillment is not proof that you were never suited to this or that you do not love your children. It is what happens when exhaustion and distancing have hollowed out a role that, with restored resources and support, can hold meaning again. The joy is not permanently gone. It is like the warmth buried under a depletion that can be addressed. Stage 4, the contrast with who you used to be. The deepest stage the research identifies is the painful contrast between the parent you were, the parent you wanted to be, and the parent burnout has turned you into. Burned out parents look at themselves and see a stranger, short tempered where they were patient, distant where they were warm, going through the motions where they once felt present. And the gap between that former self and the current one becomes a source of profound distress. This contrast is where shame and guilt concentrate most intensely, and where the suffering is often greatest. It is not only the exhaustion that hurts, it is the grief of feeling you have lost yourself, that you are failing the children you love and failing the parent you meant to be. The researchers note this contrast can produce a deep, inescapable feeling distress, which is precisely why this stage must be met with compassion and often real outside support rather than more self-criticism. If you recognize yourself here, please hear this clearly. This contrast is a known feature of a recognized syndrome, not the final truth about who you are. The parent you fear you have permanently become is a depleted version of yourself, not your real or permanent self. With rest, support, and often professional help, the gap between who you are now and who you want to be can genuinely close. Reaching this stage is not a sign you are beyond help. It is a sign you need and deserve it, not why it's not a personal failing. Running through every stage is a question that torments burned out mothers. What is wrong with me? So it deserves a direct answer. Nothing is wrong with you. Parental burnout is consistently linked not to a lack of love or strength, but to factors like overwhelming demands, insufficient support, financial and practical strain, the crushing weight of perfectionism, and the simple reality of carrying too much for too long alone. Modern motherhood, in particular, often loads parents with expectations that no human could meet without depleting themselves to be endlessly patient, present, productive, and self sacrificing, frequently with far less community and support than parents had in the past. When the demands are inhumanly high and the resources are thin, burnout is not a personal weakness. It is an almost predictable result of an unsustainable situation. And the shame so many mothers carry is one of the cruelest and least deserved parts of the whole experience. Releasing that shame is not letting yourself off the hook. It is removing an obstacle to recovery, because shame makes parents hide exactly when they most need to reach out. You did not burn out because you are a bad mother. You burned out because you are a human being who was given more than any human can sustainably carry without help. That reframe is not an excuse, it is the beginning of healing. What actually helps? Rebalancing the load. Because burnout grows from demands outweighing resources, the way out is to shift that balance. And importantly, the most powerful lever is usually not doing more, but being resourced more, increasing genuine rest, accepting and asking for help, sharing the load with a partner or others, and lowering the impossible standards you hold yourself to all add resources back to a depleted system. Trying harder spends what little you have left. Being supported is what refills it. Practical support matters enormously here, and it is not weakness to need it. Letting others take real tasks off your plate, building in actual breaks where you are off duty, rather than merely less busy, reconnecting with parts of yourself beyond the parental role, and releasing the perfectionism that demands you do it all flawlessly. These are not indulgences. They are how the imbalance gets corrected. Even small, consistent additions of rest and help can begin to turn the progression around. And for burnout that has deepened into the later stages, professional support is genuinely valuable, not a last resort or an admission of failure. A doctor, therapist, or counselor can help in ways that willpower alone cannot. And reaching out is one of the strongest and most loving things a depleted parent can do for themselves and for their children. You do not have to carry this alone, and you were never meant to. So here's what the stages of mom burnout reveal when you lay them out honestly. It begins with an imbalance, too much asked, too little to give it with, and builds from overwhelming exhaustion into emotional distancing, into a loss of fulfillment, into the painful contrast with the parent you used to be. It is a recognized syndrome with a known progression, not a private failing or a sign that you love your children any less. That progression is also crucially a map of where to intervene. The earlier you recognize the stage you are in, the easier burnout is to interrupt. And at every stage, the way back runs not through trying harder, but through being resourced more. Rest, support, shared load, lowered standards, and help when it is needed. The warmth and the joy that burnout buries are not destroyed. They are waiting underneath a depletion that can be addressed. If you saw yourself somewhere in these stages, let the most important thing you take away be this. What you are feeling makes sense. You are not a bad mother, and you are not alone in it. Loving your children and being burned out are not contradictions. Recognizing where you are is not a failure. Like, it is the first brave step toward feeling like yourself again. So tell me in the comments, only if you feel comfortable, which stage did you recognize? Sometimes simply naming it and seeing how many others have felt the same is its own kind of relief. This is a place where you do not have to pretend you are fine. This video discusses parental burnout, which is a real and serious experience. If you recognize yourself in the later stages, or if you are struggling to cope, feeling persistently hopeless, or finding it hard to care for yourself or your children, please reach out to a doctor or mental health professional. Asking for support is a sign of strength, and help genuinely makes a difference. If you want part 2 on practical ways to rebuild your resources as a parent, hit like and subscribe. New video every week.